I want to get to particularly one of the questions here that was texted in. It seems like one of the common themes running through your comments is leadership in terms of, I think we've identified probably at least a dozen things that need to happen in the next 10 years. So somebody texted in the question, should there be a single champion or ambassador charged with meeting the region's goals for the 10-year goals? If so, who's that person?
I don't think there can be a single person. I think, that we all are the leaders. The mayor can't do it. The county commissioners can't do it. The Cape Fear Future leadership team that I've had the pleasure of meeting and interacting with in a very minor way, but from Jack Bardo, who runs the hospital, to Rosemary DiPaolo, who runs the university, to the leadership from Cape Fear Community College and some of the biggest companies and employers here. They're all very busy people, and they're all very committed in trying to do the right thing. We have to mobilize, and we have to help them be better at planning. Now, I want to make this point. Over the last decade or so, and particularly from let's say 96 to 2006, when we saw the population here virtually double, one of the things that it seems to me a failure was that there was not a census taken about what that population increase represented. It seemed to me that when the university or anyone else who does economic impact studies, that they failed to take a census of this movement that we're all talking about, that I call Wilmington 2.0. It's not a new idea. In other words, it's been underway for the last decade, and a lot of us just failed to capture it. A great friend of mine, Dan Smith, who lives here in Wilmington, he calls a group of us who moved here from other places because we hated the weather, and we hated being in offices, and we hated being in traffic jams every day. He calls us the misfits, and I like that. That's okay, because we have to kind of come up with some way to describe who were these people that moved here, because location no longer mattered. They were virtually enabled because of technology. They were airport enabled beautifully, so it really didn't matter where they lived. And there's a lot of people. There are hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands, that moved here that fit that profile. And when you fly like I did for 100 days a year out of Wilmington, I got to meet a lot of them. And now I've been done for a few years, but I did it, and I met all these just startling people. They are seeking an opportunity to connect to community. They just need a way to channel it. And taking a census of these misfits and understanding who they are and what they do, we'll be able to declare victory on a lot of the things that we say we want to do in terms of branding just by what we already have here, let alone what our potential is. It's extraordinary. So I think that's a critical undertaking that someone ought to do. Now, a final thing, and I know this is a shameless plug, but a lot of people ask, well, Cape Fear Future, Wilmington 2.0, I mean, I want to be a part of it. What I do? And while it's a startup and while we're really in our infancy, there's a website you can visit, and it's called www.uncwec.org. And the EC stands for the Entrepreneurial Center. And to the credit of Rosemary and to Larry Clark, who runs the Cameron Business School, they're keeping pace with what's going on. They have a vision, and they're a part of it. The website, www.uncwec.org, will give you some sense of what Cape Fear Future and Wilmington 2.0 is all about, but more importantly, help start this census taking.
Melanie?
Getting back to the question, whether or not there should be a coordinator or a point person on this, I tend to think the answer might be yes and no. I agree that one entity, one individual is not going to be able to point this town in the right direction and project it forward in and of on their own. But when you recognize that there are entities out there that are working in a less than coordinated way towards a common goal. The question is, how do we get there? If the elements are here, we keep talking about the elements are here, the intellectual capacity is here, extremely giving community. People are willing to get involved, to get engaged, extremely passionate community. Once people engage, they engage strongly and fully, but there is not a point entity. There's not a coordinated body. There's not a monthly meeting. There's not a quarterly meeting where people can get together and say, this is what I think is a goal we need to move towards, and I'm willing to be part of a team of 6 or 7, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, however many it takes to get from point A to point B. There's not an accounting. You talk about a census that counts the people who are already here and what their strengths and abilities are. I think that's a great jumping off point. But knowing that you're in the community and figuring out how to put people to work in a way that's going to benefit the community, I think is step 2 as part of that process. And then constant follow-up. One of the things, as long as we're plugging entities, is that the organization that I worked with came together, Coastal Carolina Tomorrow, about 3 years ago, spontaneously in response to a sewer crisis that had occurred in the community. There were a lot of people who thought, okay, once the big hot button issue is gone, you guys will dissolve, and there won't be any drive or determination to continue to serve the community, and that has proven not to be the case at all. Once engaged, these professionals are willing to engage in a multitude of subjects. And I think everybody in this room was probably willing to do the same. But without the ability to meet on a regular basis, without the ability to break down into subgroups to determine, okay, these are the issues under this category that we need to work on. Everybody doesn't bring the same level of expertise, but work on those issues that you have a strength and then report that information back for the common good. And I think that's a model that can work for this community and has to work for this community, is working for this community to a certain degree, but I think could work far more effectively if we could figure out how to get people in the same room or in the room over this periodic time and develop a game plan and coordinate the game plan. Now, whether we call it 2.0 or whether we call it Cape Fear Futures or whatever tomorrow, we have to stop yabbing about it and start figuring out how to put it into effect.